The wine glasses were still wet. That was the first thing I noticed when I walked into the kitchen. 2 glasses in the drying rack, side by side. Not ours. Ours were older, scratched at the base from years of being tossed into the dishwasher. These were smooth, expensive, with a gold ring around the lip. New, fresh, unfamiliar. Just like the scent that lingered in the air, something woody, not her usual lavender. I didn't even take off my shoes. I stood there, dripping from the rain, holding my suitcase like it might still convince me I hadn't come home a day early. The second thing I noticed was the jacket. It was flung casually over the back of a chair in the dining room. Leather. Men's. There was still warmth clinging to it. I touched it, like an idiot, thinking maybe it would vanish or turn into something innocent. But it didn't. That's when I heard the low murmur from upstairs. Footsteps. Not hers. His were heavier. Careless. The kind of footsteps that belong to someone who doesn't worry about being heard because he thinks he's supposed to be there. And then her laugh. Not the one she uses with me when I bring her coffee. Not the tired chuckle she gives during Netflix shows. This one was younger, lighter, like the version of her from when we first met, before routine pressed into her voice. I didn't call her name. Didn't shout. Didn't even breathe loud enough to give myself away. I walked to the staircase and placed my hand on the railing, tracing the familiar scratch marks from when we moved in our first week, when the movers dinnered it with the couch. Funny what you remember when everything else is burning. The door to the bedroom was open an inch. One stupid inch. Her robe, my robe, actually was hanging off the handle. I stood there, soaking, heart cracking at a pace I could feel in my throat. And still, I waited. Still hoped. Still tried to tell myself that maybe this was a dream. Maybe this was all some twisted mistake. Then I saw the shadow move across the floor. 2 silhouettes. One sitting, one leaning. And then a voice, his, said, "He's really that clueless?" And she replied, laughing, "He still thinks I like classical music." I turned and walked back down the stairs, but I didn't leave. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. Our couch. The one we picked out together. I placed my suitcase beside me, leaned forward, and just stared at the framed photo of our wedding on the shelf. The last thing I did before speaking was straighten the picture. Then, with a voice I barely recognized, I called out calmly, "Nadine, when you're done pretending I'm a ghost, come downstairs." I heard the sound of bare feet on hardwood. Soft, slow, deliberate. Each step she took felt like it echoed in some hollow part of me I didn't realize had gone so empty. Nadine wasn't rushing, wasn't scrambling to explain or hide anything. She came down those stairs like it was any other night. Like I hadn't just caught the tail end of her betrayal folding itself into the walls of our home. She reached the bottom step and stopped when she saw me sitting there. Her robe was tied loosely around her waist. That smug, casual look on her face, it made my skin crawl. It was the same look she wore when I forgot to take out the trash or left the laundry in the washer overnight. Mild irritation, like I was the one ruining her moment. "You're home early," she said flatly, arms crossed, but not in shame, more like defense. Her tone wasn't surprised. It was calculated, measured, practiced, like she'd run through this scenario in her head already, just in case. I didn't respond. Just kept my eyes on her, waiting for her to offer something, an explanation, a name, a reason. Instead, she tilted her head and glanced toward the stairs behind her. "You want to talk about this now?" she asked, as if I just walked in on her hosting a book club. "Because if you do, I'd really prefer to get dressed first." It took everything in me not to laugh, not to scream. I felt like I was watching a stranger wear my wife's face. "Is he still up there?" I asked. My voice cracked a little. I hated that. Hated sounding like some broken thing. Should I say hi? Offer him a beer? Nadine rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Emery." "Dramatic?" I leaned back into the couch, the cushions collapsing under my weight like they, too, had given up on holding anything steady. I stared at the ceiling for a second, trying to find the words that wouldn't make me feel even more pathetic. But nothing came. Just silence. Just her breathing across the room and the ticking of the wall clock behind me. She walked past me toward the kitchen, like she needed distance. Like she had the right to it. I watched as she opened the fridge and poured herself a glass of water. I noticed she used the blue glass. My glass. The one I always reached for, even though we had a dozen others. "How long has this been going on?" I asked finally. She didn't answer right away. She took a sip first, then another. "Does it matter?" she said, setting the glass down gently. "You've been gone more than you've been here lately." "I've been alone, Emery." "You weren't here?" I was working, I muttered. For us. No. You were avoiding this house, she said coldly. You were avoiding me. That stung. Because deep down, I think she was right. I had been avoiding things, conversations, disappointments, awkward silences. But that wasn't permission for this. For some stranger's jacket in my dining room and a smirk on her lips as if I were the intruder. I stood up slowly, trying to steady myself. I didn't deserve this, I said, more to myself than to her. Nadine didn't argue. She just looked at me. No apology. No regret. Just a woman who had clearly crossed her line long before I knew it even existed. Then we both froze at the same time. The floor creaked upstairs. He was still here, and now he was moving. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, every part of me bracing for what came next. And Nadine? She didn't yell up to tell him to stay put. She didn't even flinch. She just leaned back against the counter and whispered without looking at me, "Don't do anything stupid, Emery. You're not built for that." And just like that, something in me shattered a little deeper. The footsteps crept closer, casual, steady, utterly unbothered. No panic. No scrambling to escape through the window or hide in the closet. Whoever this guy was, he walked with the confidence of someone who had no intention of leaving out the back door. I stood frozen in the living room, gripping the edge of the couch like it would keep me grounded in a reality that had already split in two. Nadine didn't move. She just watched me from the kitchen like she was curious which version of me she'd be dealing with tonight, the spineless one or the one who might finally snap. Then, the man came into view. He descended the stairs slowly, one hand sliding along the banister like it was his house, like he belonged here more than I did. He wore my gym t-shirt. I hadn't even noticed it was gone. My shirt. On him. The symbolism wasn't subtle. He stopped halfway down and looked directly at me. No guilt. No shame. Just a slight smirk, like he already knew I wasn't a threat. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong. "Hey, man," he said, like we were old buddies catching up. "Didn't know you were back." I blinked at him. For a second, I thought I'd hallucinated that tone. That "hey, man," like I just walked in on someone eating the last slice of pizza, not the woman I loved, my wife. Nadine still hadn't said his name, and that fact alone made me feel like I was at a party I didn't know I'd been uninvited to. I stepped toward the stairs. "Get out of my house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even as every word scraped through my throat. "Now." He shrugged like I'd asked him to take the trash out. "Yeah, sure. Just let me grab my stuff." He walked past me. Past me. His shoulder brushed mine, and I flinched. The cologne was the same one I smelled earlier. Musky, bold, like he had no doubt he belonged everywhere. He walked into the dining room, grabbed his jacket, his phone, and no joke, a small paper bag with leftovers from our fridge. Nadine didn't stop him. When he came back through the room, he glanced at her and said, "Text me later?" She gave him a nod. A nod. That was when something in me cracked, not into anger, but into something worse. Something hollow. I turned back toward her, and she was already cleaning up the kitchen like it was just another evening. Wiping the counters. Running water. Rinsing the wine glasses I hadn't even known we owned. "How many times?" I asked. The words were barely audible, but they landed with weight. "How many nights did you bring him here?" She paused for half a second, just long enough to answer without answering. "It wasn't always here," she said finally, not even looking at me. "Sometimes it was his place." I think I stopped breathing. I genuinely don't remember the moment I sat down again, but I was suddenly back on the couch, hands trembling, lips dry. There was a sound in my ears, like static, like something buzzing far away but too loud to tune out. "You planned this," I whispered. "You waited until I left. You made a schedule around me." Nadine dried her hands on the towel and finally turned around to face me fully. Her face had no softness left in it. "Not for me. Don't make this more dramatic than it is, Emery," she said. "You were always somewhere else." I just stopped pretending I was okay with it. I stared at her for a long time. This woman I had once held during thunderstorms. The one I'd stayed up with when her father died. The woman who had once whispered, "Promise me you'll never leave first." And now I was the stranger standing in a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. I don't remember when I stood up again, only that I walked to the mantel where our wedding photo still sat. I picked it up and turned it over. The date was written in faded pen. The frame was cracked slightly on the corner. I held it in my hands like it had weight, like it could anchor me to something that once mattered. Then I looked at her and said quietly, "You can have the house." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, voice suddenly steady, "you're not going to have to sneak around anymore." And I walked past her, grabbing my keys off the hook, my suitcase still sitting at the door from when I first arrived. The only thing I took with me was the photo. Not because I wanted to remember the marriage, but because I needed to remind myself it wasn't always a lie. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I drove aimlessly that night, not because I didn't know where to go, but because I couldn't admit that I had nowhere to go. I circled the neighborhood twice before even leaving our block. I passed the grocery store where Nadine and I used to sneak in at midnight just to laugh at the terrible music and buy cookie dough we swore we wouldn't eat in one sitting. I drove past the coffee shop where I proposed to her in the rain because I forgot to plan anything better. Every corner of that town held a memory I didn't know how to look at anymore. It felt like I was watching my life through glass, familiar but untouchable. I finally ended up in the parking lot of a closed hardware store, of all places. I sat in my car, staring at the reflection of the neon sign bouncing off the windshield. I could have called someone, but who? My brother was 1,000 miles away. My parents barely spoke to each other, and most of my friends had become hers over the years. Or worse, ours. And now even we were past tense. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. At some point, I realized I hadn't cried yet. Not really. I choked a little, felt the sting behind my eyes, but nothing had come out. I think I was too numb to cry. Like my body hadn't caught up to the betrayal yet. Then my phone buzzed. I expected it to be Nadine. A half-hearted apology. Maybe a venom-laced explanation. But it wasn't. It was her sister. Lisa, are you okay? I didn't know you were coming home early. That hit me harder than I expected. Because it meant she knew. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I replied. Me, how long have you known? The dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back. I waited like a fool. Lisa, I didn't agree with it. But I figured it wasn't my place. She told me she was going to tell you. Tell me. Sure. Like people plan to jump in front of moving trains. Me, she said that. Lisa, not exactly. But she made it sound like she had reasons. Honestly, I think she just wanted out and didn't know how to say it. Wanted out. That was the part that broke me, not the cheating. Not even the lies. But the idea that she didn't love me anymore and had quietly quit without saying it. She just waited for me to catch up. Like I was supposed to eventually notice she had emotionally moved out and packed my own bags. At some point, I found myself driving back to the house. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd left something. Maybe I wanted to see if it was all really real. Maybe I thought she'd be gone. But the lights were still on. Her car was still there. And through the window, I could see her, alone now, standing in the kitchen, sipping tea like it was the most peaceful night of her life. Something in me boiled up that I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not rage. Not even heartbreak. It was clarity. Cold, brutal clarity. The kind that strips everything down to the bone. I parked 2 houses away and walked back on foot. Quiet. Unannounced. I didn't go to the front door. I went around the back, to the garden I'd spent 3 summers trying to build for her. Raised beds, fairy lights, the stupid herb spiral that kept collapsing every time it rained. From the garden, I could see the dining table clearly. The wine glasses had been washed and placed on the counter. The jacket was gone. The air looked normal again. But nothing was normal. That's when I saw her pick up a phone and make a call. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her smile. That soft smile. The one she used to give me when she was nervous but excited. She nodded at something the other person said. Then she laughed. She laughed. Right then, knowing I was somewhere out there, maybe still sobbing, maybe halfway to a breakdown, she laughed. And that's when I realized, this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It wasn't even about me. This was a woman who had already moved on. Long before tonight. She just hadn't bothered to tell me because it was easier to let me believe in something that had died a long time ago. I turned and walked back toward my car. I didn't knock. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just drove off, this time for good. But before I pulled away from the neighborhood entirely, I stopped 1 block down, opened my phone, and did something I never thought I'd do. I opened our shared photo storage app and downloaded every single picture we ever took. Then I deleted the shared account. 1 clean cut. 1 clear line in the sand. Because now, the only thing left to do was burn what remained quietly, completely, and without ever asking for permission. The next morning didn't feel real. I woke up on a lumpy pull-out couch in a motel that reeked of cheap detergent and disappointment. The walls were paper-thin, and some guy in the next room had been coughing all night like he was trying to lose a lung. I laid there staring at the ceiling fan, watching it wobble as it spun, wondering if today was going to be the day I started screaming in public. I hadn't slept. Not really. My body shut down for maybe an hour, but my mind had been chewing on everything. Her voice, that laugh, the way she didn't run after me, not even a text to pretend like I mattered. I kept checking my phone, even though I told myself I wouldn't. Nothing. No missed calls. No new messages. Just that one short text from Lisa the night before, which I'd read more times than I'd admit. At around 9 a.m., I checked out of the motel and sat in the parking lot for almost 30 minutes, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. My entire life, my routine, my home, my wife was back there in that house. But it didn't belong to me anymore. I was a ghost haunting the edges of a life that had already moved on without me. Eventually, I drove back. Not to confront her. I wasn't even sure she'd be home. I just needed to collect my things. Not all of them, just the essentials. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of watching me pack like some devastated loser. I just wanted to slip in, grab what was mine, and disappear without leaving a note. The neighborhood was quiet when I pulled up. Her car wasn't in the driveway. That gave me a window. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, expecting to feel something. Pain, rage, shame. But instead, I felt nothing. Just a strange stillness, like the house had already forgotten I existed. I moved quickly. Backpack, charger, 2 changes of clothes, my passport, the external hard drive I used for work. I tried not to look around too much. I didn't want to see the framed pictures, the wine rack she insisted on filling with bottles we never drank, the book she never finished reading but kept on the nightstand to seem sophisticated. But then I opened the hall closet, and that's when I found it. A box. A simple, unlabeled cardboard box tucked behind a stack of winter scarves. Not hers. Not mine. Just hidden. And that was enough to make my hand reach for it, even though every nerve in my body screamed to just walk away. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Folded. Some old and yellowed. Some written on crisp white stationery. I picked one up. The handwriting was neat. Almost too neat. Definitely not mine. I read the first few lines and felt my chest go cold. They were from him. Not just recent. Not just flirty nonsense. These letters went back years. 2.5, maybe more. All of them addressed to her by name. Nicknames. Pet names. All of them written like they were living a life I wasn't even aware existed. There were details about trips. About secret meetings. About plans. One letter said, next year, when he's out of town again, we'll spend the whole week together. No more hiding. Another one read, he's so oblivious. You're wasting your life with a man who doesn't see you. I do. And the worst part? In one envelope, there was a photo. A selfie. Her and him. Smiling. At a cabin I had paid for. A weekend I thought she'd spend alone, reconnecting with herself. My hands started shaking. My vision blurred. I didn't know if I was about to collapse or explode. I sat down on the floor with the box open beside me and realized this wasn't just an affair. This was a second life. One she kept separate, secret, and safe from my eyes. I had been living beside a stranger, sleeping next to someone who wore loyalty like a costume and took it off the second I turned away. I should have left the box there. I should have just taken my backpack and walked away. But something inside me snapped. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to scream or confront her or burn the house down. I just wanted her to know that I knew everything. So I took the box. And as I walked out the door, I left only one thing behind on the kitchen counter. Our wedding photo. Frame cracked. Face down. I didn't even shut the door behind me. I didn't go to a friend's house. I didn't check into another motel. I drove out of town with the windows down, letting the cold air whip through the car and drown out the noise in my head. I didn't know where I was headed. I just wanted to feel like I was leaving something behind. After about 40 miles of silence, I pulled into the parking lot of a rest stop near the state line. It was mostly empty. A couple of truckers, a woman walking her dog, and me, sitting there with a stolen box of betrayal in my back seat like it was made of explosives. I turned off the ignition and sat in the stillness. The letters were sitting on the passenger seat, half of them already unfolded, revealing years of lies and midnight rendezvous in neat cursive. I picked one at random and read it again, as if some new line might make it all make sense. He'll never understand you like I do. You were never meant for a quiet life, Nadine. You were made to be seen. When you're finally ready to leave him, I'll be here. There were dates on those letters, matching ones with her fake excuses. Yoga retreats, sick aunts, work dinners. She'd been rehearsing her betrayals like a stage play, and I had been in the audience, clapping like an idiot while she accepted applause from someone else behind the curtain. I should have thrown it all out. Burned it, maybe. Let it blow across a highway so the wind could carry it far from my life. But instead, I took out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I didn't think. I just hit record, and I started speaking. I know about the letters, I said, my voice raw and cracked from too little sleep and too many truths. I know about the cabin, about M, or whatever name he actually uses. I found the box you hid behind the scarves, and I read every last word. I paused. My hand was shaking, but I kept going. You said I was clueless. You told him I wouldn't notice. You told him I didn't see you. But I did. I saw you every damn day. I just thought love meant patience. I thought it meant staying quiet when the person you love starts drifting because they're hurting. I thought maybe it was a phase, something we'd survive. Turns out, you were building an escape plan while I was still showing up for us. Another pause. I looked out the window. The sky was gray and low, like it wanted to snow but hadn't worked up the courage yet. You didn't break my heart, Nadine. You erased it. You wrote over it with someone else's name, someone else's voice. And now? Now I'm not here to ask you why. I'm not here to fight for something you already buried. I'm just here to say, I see you now, clearly. And that might be the most painful part. I hit stop. I didn't edit it. I didn't replay it. I attached the recording to a text and sent it to her with no words, just the audio file. Then I turned my phone off. I sat there for hours after that, not moving, just thinking about every single time I defended her to my friends when they noticed her growing distant. Every time I canceled something at work to make it to her gallery nights. Every time I made excuses for her coldness, her silence, her sudden bursts of anger over nothing. I gave her grace while she handed someone else the pieces of me she broke. Around sunset, I drove to my cousin Felix's cabin. He'd offered it to me years ago if I ever needed to get away. I never thought I'd actually take him up on it. It was tucked in the woods 2 hours from home, barely had cell signal, and looked like it had been decorated by a man who thought plaid flannel counted as art. But it was quiet, and it was mine. For now, I unpacked nothing. I laid on the floor with my jacket as a pillow and stared at the wooden beams overhead until the darkness swallowed them. Somewhere deep in the night, my phone buzzed from where I'd tossed it face down near the door. I turned it over. It was Nadine. No words, just a voice message. I hesitated, heart pounding, before pressing play. Her voice came through, unsteady and breathless. You weren't supposed to hear that. You weren't supposed to. Emery, I didn't know how to leave you without destroying you. I didn't want it to be like this. There was a pause. I could hear her trying to catch her breath. I didn't want to fall for him. It just happened. And I was going to tell you. Eventually. I swear I was. Another pause. A sigh. I'm sorry, but I'm not coming to the cabin. Please don't make this worse than it has to be. And just like that, it ended. But she was wrong. Because by then, it had already gotten worse than anything I ever could have imagined. I didn't respond to her message. Not right away. Maybe not at all. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for the clarity? Or maybe, glad to know I wasn't enough in just the right amount for you to fall into someone else's bed? I stared at her voice recording until my phone shut off from inactivity, then turned it back over and let the screen stay dark. Outside the cabin, the wind pressed through the trees with a quiet pressure, like nature itself was whispering things I wasn't ready to hear. I hadn't eaten in over a day. My backpack sat untouched in the corner, and that damn box of letters, still there, sealed shut again, but pulsing like it had a heartbeat. I couldn't sleep, but I couldn't bring myself to leave either. I was somewhere between paralysis and clarity, like when your foot falls asleep, but you're afraid to move it because you know the pain's coming. Around midday, I went for a walk just to escape the walls pressing in. The trail behind the cabin ran alongside a half-frozen creek, and the ground crunched beneath my boots. Everything looked dead, branches bare, sky dim, air brittle, but for the first time in days, it felt honest. There was no pretending out here. No lies in the frost. Just cold, unvarnished truth. When I got back, there were 3 missed calls from her. Then a text. Nadine, why are you being like this? You said you didn't want to make a scene. A scene? She thought this was about a scene? I didn't answer. I couldn't. But something inside me started to twist. Not rage, not grief, but resolve. A quiet kind of fury that doesn't explode, it settles. Like concrete. That night, I opened the box again. I scanned through each letter, rereading bits and pieces, not out of masochism, but because I needed to understand just how far it went. I noticed patterns, references to places I had taken her, words he used that I had said first. I saw a message that mentioned our anniversary weekend. While I was setting up the Airbnb, she was texting him from the bathroom. And then I saw it. An address. A handwritten line in one of the more recent letters. If you ever want to see the place we talked about, it's on Dovetail Lane. Use the back gate. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't know what it meant exactly, but my gut told me it wasn't just poetic. It was real. I searched the address. 30 minutes from our house. Suburb. Gated community. A new development we'd once driven past, joking about how we couldn't afford to live there. Turns out she could. With him. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't think twice. I just packed the letters, threw on a coat, and drove. My hands didn't shake this time. No nerves. No second guessing. I wasn't storming in. I wasn't confronting her. I was collecting evidence for my own survival. When I pulled up to the house, I knew instantly. I didn't have to check the mailbox or the street number. The curtains were hers. The wind chime was the same one she'd bookmarked online, but claimed was too expensive for our budget. The garden gnome by the porch? The one I told her looked like it was judging people? Yeah, he was right there, smirking at me. I parked a block down and walked around back like the letter said. The gate was unlocked. Inside, I didn't find her. I found them. Photos. Dozens of them, lined up inside by the window. Her and him. Laughing. Hugging. One of her sitting on the same kitchen counter where she once told me she couldn't imagine life with anyone else. There were takeout boxes from the same Thai place she always claimed gave her indigestion. And on the fridge, a calendar. Their calendar. I saw my name once, crossed out. On her birthday. I backed away slowly. I didn't take anything. I didn't leave anything either. I just walked out the way I came in, got back in my car, and drove until the gas light blinked and the road felt unfamiliar again. And that night, as I sat alone at a gas station off Route 9, I finally wrote something of my own. A letter. 1 page. Folded neatly. And I mailed it to her the next morning. No return address. Just her name, and the words I'd never get to say face to face. He didn't steal you. You gave yourself away. And now, I'm giving myself permission to disappear. I didn't expect anything after I mailed the letter. I wasn't looking for closure or redemption. I just wanted to set something down and walk away before it got too heavy to carry. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't go back to the cabin. I didn't check my phone. I drove for hours through towns I'd never heard of, stopping only for gas and whatever fast food I could stomach without crying into the fries. It was a strange kind of freedom, quiet, sharp, and unfamiliar. But it was mine. A few days later, I ended up in a town called Fairwater. Small place. Brick buildings. A diner that served pancakes all day. I rented a tiny furnished room above an old man's garage. He didn't ask questions. I didn't give answers. I just paid him in cash and promised not to be loud. It was perfect. For the first time in years, I woke up without a text from Nadine or a mental checklist of things I had to do to keep our life glued together. No more tiptoeing around moods. No more guessing games. Just silence. And in that silence, I started hearing my own thoughts again. Not the sad ones, not just the echo of betrayal, but the ones I hadn't made room for in a long time. I got a job at a local supply store. It wasn't glamorous. I stocked shelves and helped retirees find screws they didn't need. But it felt good to move. To do something that didn't require pretending. Weeks passed. Then one morning, my phone buzzed while I was drinking coffee on the front steps. A message from an unknown number. I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know I got your letter. I hope you're okay. That's all. I stared at it for a long time. No name, but I didn't need one. I didn't respond. Because by then, I finally understood something I never thought I would. I wasn't broken. I was just free. I didn't lose a wife. I lost the version of myself that thought love meant sacrificing your voice, your needs, your worth. I lost the habit of begging to be chosen by someone who stopped choosing me a long time ago. I lost the lie that staying meant strength, when sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do. Eventually, I made friends in town. The diner owner, Delia, started leaving extra pie on the counter by accident when I came in. I started writing again, nothing fancy, just journaling, remembering who I used to be before everything revolved around keeping someone else happy. One night, I looked up at the sky and realized I'd gone a whole day without thinking of her. Not once. Not even in the cracks between thoughts. And I smiled. A real smile. The kind that doesn't ask permission. You see, the story didn't end the night I found her in our house with another man. That's just when her part in my story ended. The rest? That's mine now. And it finally feels like a story worth telling.